Welcome to the Recover You podcast. I'm Kylene.
And I'm Patrick.
We are a couple in recovery
from sex addiction
and betrayal trauma. Together, we share our story to encourage you on your journey. It's here that we talk about sex addiction, betrayal trauma, mental, emotional, and physical health, faith, and anything and everything needed to recover you to your most authentic self that God created you to be. Welcome, everyone, to this week's episode of Recover You. I'm thrilled today to have Sheila Gregoire on today's episode. She has made a huge impact in, I'm sure, many of your lives. And Sheila, I know that that's true because when I announced that we were going to have you on the podcast, people were very, very excited. So let me give a quick intro for anyone that doesn't know who you are. She is the author of 11 books, including The Great Sex Rescue and The Marriage You Want, and she hosts the Bare Marriage podcast. She's an award-winning writer, and she calls the church to more than just pat answers by conducting original research to find out what advice works and what really doesn't. Sheila and her husband Keith have been married for over 30 years. Together, they have 2 adult daughters, 1 son in heaven, 2 sons-in-law, and 2 adorable grandchildren. And Sheila knits, even in line at the grocery store. I love that little fun fact. And you just moved, so I hope that went smoothly. And we are so appreciative that you've taken the time to be here today.
Yeah, I just realized that bio is 2 years out of date because I have 4 grandchildren now.
Oh, congratulations. That's wonderful.
Old, so yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So we connected a little bit through Threads. And so I knew that I was putting out good content when you chose to repost 1 or 2. Made me feel really good. So I really just want to start today's episode by thanking you for your voice and your work because I hope that you're told this often, but just in case you aren't, the messages that you're putting out into the world really is so important because it's really freeing people. It's transforming lives. It's helping people understand what truth and what health really is. And that really provides such value to people, especially in the Christian community that you really kind of highlight and focus on. So we just want to really thank you for everything that you do and put out there, because I know it's not easy and it takes a lot of work.
Yeah, thank you for that. It does. And it can be really, I find that it's really demoralizing when I focus on the powers that be. But when I don't focus on them and I just focus on regular people and the people who are writing to me, then I realize, oh no, this is what we're supposed to be. This is the community we're supposed to have. And that's kind of what Jesus did. Like he didn't worry himself about what the Pharisees were doing or what the Romans were doing. He just collected his band of people who were truly seeking after him. And so, yeah, sometimes I just need that perspective shift.
Yes. And I hope you hear that positive feedback from people all the time because it really is making a difference. And I have a statement that I'm going to read from my husband at some point in today's episode because he really wanted to share with you as well the impact that you've made on him. So, I think a lot of your work has to do with how when we don't understand what healthy sexuality is, when we don't understand what marriage is supposed to be, and then on top of it, we are taught messages that are actually harmful in the name of spirituality, it just causes so many problems. So maybe we can kind of begin there. In the book that you wrote, The Marriage You Want, you say the problem with sex in Christian relationships isn't so much the absence of good teaching as much as it is the presence of bad teaching. Can you kind of speak to that a little bit?
Yeah. So I started blogging in 2008. I was in the mommy blogging sphere. Back then, everybody was doing it. And the more I talked about sex, the more my traffic grew. And so I kind of became this Christian sex lady, okay, which is weird. Like no one grows up thinking that's what they want to do with their life. Right. But I spent about 10 years putting out really good content. Like I was teaching good peer-reviewed stuff about sex, like good evidence-based things, and good evidence-based things about marriage. And I hadn't read what other people were writing. So I just sort of assumed that other Christians, well, they love Jesus, I love Jesus, we're all saying the same thing. And I was really afraid of plagiarizing. This is before AI. I think that's so funny that I was afraid of plagiarizing other people and now everyone's but anyway. And then in 2019, I sat down and I read Love and Respect for the first time. And it was a huge mindset shift and a huge turning point in what we do. Yeah. Because I realized it didn't matter how much good content I put out there. It didn't matter how many people read the good stuff. If they were still believing the bad stuff, the good stuff wasn't going to overcome it because the bad stuff was just too destructive. And that's what we've had in evangelicalism for the longest time, is we have so fundamentally misunderstood what intimacy is and what healthy sexuality is, that no matter how much good stuff we give out, if that basis is wrong, if that basis is faulty, we're never going to get the kind of relationships that we want.
Yeah. It really is. I think so many people relate to your work because we were raised in, it's so subversive. I feel like it's not even always like blatantly stated. Sometimes it is, but it's a lot of like this cultural thing that you sort of absorb over time through your church culture and through some of the teachings. And it's so damaging to so many people. And so I think when you hear a voice so clearly pointing out how and why that was harmful, it's like this, it's like the scales fall off people's eyes a little bit, or at least for the people that are victimized, not always as we've seen the people pushing the messages, which is unfortunate, but.
Yeah. And that's something that we really try to do, because I feel like for years, the conversations have been so focused on doctrine and the original Greek and when people talk over each other, whether it's about gender or marriage, we get into these back and forth that nobody seemed to ever win. Yeah. And so I thought, well, let's just take it out of the realm of doctrine. Let's take it out of the realm of Greek, and let's just look at numbers. And so that's what we've done with our studies. We're 4 studies deep now. We've surveyed over 40,000 people. And now we're able to say, all right, you can believe that if you want, but she's going to have a 36% lower orgasm rate. And I find that's quite quite effective.
There you go. I love it. One of the things that you say that is so counter to what many people hear is actually you shouldn't prioritize sex in your marriage. And you talk about foundations versus frills. And so that, when people hear that, I feel like they've totally been raised the opposite way, right? Like, this is the bomb in your marriage. This is the glue that keeps people together, right? So can you maybe talk a little bit about that foundation versus frills, and what do you mean when you say, sex shouldn't be the priority per se?
Okay. So when pastors or authors or influencers, when they say prioritize sex, what do they mean? What do you think they're saying?
We gotta have the 72-hour rule. You gotta have whenever I want it. You can't say no, right?
Yeah, you got to do it more, right? That's what they mean. They're talking about frequency. You just have to do it more. Here's the problem. Having sexual intercourse does not mean that the marriage is good. It does not tell you anything except for how often he is ejaculating. That is the only thing that frequency tells you for sure. Because she could be lying there making a grocery list in her head. She could be lying there in emotional turmoil. She could even be in physical pain, and that would still count as having sex. That would still count as prioritizing sex, in the words of these pastors, authors, whoever it is. And what we found is that the assumption is, in most of evangelicalism, the assumption is that the reason that sex isn't happening is because she is withholding, because she doesn't want sex enough, and she isn't prioritizing it, and she isn't recognizing his needs. And so she just has to have more sex. That's actually demonstrably and measurably untrue. Because when we looked at the data, what we found is that, and I'm going to list 5 things here, so I want you all to listen, okay? When she frequently reaches orgasm, when there's high marital satisfaction, when she feels emotionally connected during sex, when there's no porn use in the marriage, and when there's no sexual dysfunction in the marriage, frequency takes care of itself. Nobody is telling people with those 5 things present, hey, you need to prioritize sex. Because sex is just happening, because libido is just happening. Libido's there. So the issue is not how frequently you're having sex. And so if her libido is gone, that should be met not with condemnation, but with curiosity. Yeah. So what's going on then? Like which of those 5 things isn't happening, And it could be anything. It doesn't even necessarily mean that it's his fault. If she grew up in purity culture, if she grew up in the evangelical church, she probably internalized a lot of beliefs that made sex seem really ugly. And so maybe the reason she doesn't feel emotionally close is because of those beliefs. Or maybe she was sexually assaulted in the past and she has a lot of trauma and triggers that need to be dealt with. Like, it doesn't mean the marriage is lousy.
Right.
It just means we've got to address the root here. And that's what I mean by foundation and frills. Like, we need to focus on what are the foundational things that lead to, that are absolutely vital, that are people's base needs. And then what are the frills? And frequency is a frill. You know, how often you have sex is a frill. The fact that sex is pain-free is a foundation. The fact that both people enjoy it is a foundation. You don't get to talk about frequency if she's not reaching orgasm. You don't get to talk about how to spice things up if he's also using porn and making her feel dehumanized and used.
That's it. Yeah. Oh, I love that you started that whole thing with it does not represent a healthy marriage the number of times you're doing it. Like, because I mean, it's just so deeply, that's what was taught for so long. It was, well, still is in many ways. And gosh, I love that you just listed out all of those things, because as this podcast is a lot about helping sex and porn addicts recover and their betrayed partners recover, and if it's healthy, reconciling the marriage in those situations when it's healthy. But yeah, I mean, there's so many underlying reasons that it messes with sexuality. And it's like, man, if we don't address that, like if we don't have emotional intimacy, why do we think it's okay to have physical intimacy? If we can't have trust, we shouldn't be, you know, but people feel so much pressure. Well, I can't say no. And, you know, so it's such a huge thing that you're out there kind of sharing real life statistics and truths and helping people understand that there's a difference between these foundations and frills. There's a need here that's not being met in a lot of ways and a lot of times. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of messaging that to me is extremely frustrating is, you know, on one hand, I can almost understand men that do it, right? The messaging that's come through the years. But I think sometimes it's so frustrating when I hear women teaching other women really bad things. And that is this idea that it really infantilizes men, that men are not capable of more. And it also kind of pushes this this idea that women, they have to override themselves in a lot of ways. And it's, I don't know. It's just this. I don't know why the women feel it. It blows my mind when they do it. But what can you talk about when women or when anybody shares this? But what is your perspective then of what the roles in a marriage are? Because we get so much messaging around this from people in negative ways.
Yeah. So, you know, what we're often told is that God made men and women equal and valuable with different roles. And what we mean by that is that the man gets to lead and the woman gets to follow. But you can't be equal in value if her role is inferior to his. Because if her role is inferior to his, and the only reason that it's inferior is because she's a woman, then you cannot say that being a woman is equal in value to a man. Right? Because people will say, oh, but an employee has to do what an employer says, and you're not saying the employee isn't equal in value. Yeah, but the employee could one day be an employer. A woman can only ever be a woman, and if the reason that she has an inferior status is because she's a woman, then you do feel that being a woman is inferior.
Right.
You know, and there really is no way around. That's just a basic that's a logical, that's just how logic works, okay? And so what we did was we actually measured it, because when people say that a man's responsibility is to lead, how do you measure it? Like we had a really difficult time trying to figure out how to measure this. And what we came down to it was we looked at decision making. So we said, like, in your marriage, if there's a really important decision, how do you make it? You know, do you talk it through? Do you decide together? Do you go forward? You know, even if you don't agree, does he make the final decision? Like, what happens? And in complementarianism, which is the belief that men are in authority over women, he would make the final decision. And so we looked at it. We said, well, what happens when he makes the final decision? And what we found is that divorce rates skyrocket, which is what John Gottman found as well. He's the world's premier marriage researcher. He found a divorce rate of 81%.
Wow.
So we have divorce rates skyrocketing. We have abuse rates higher. And we have all kinds of really negative outcomes. And even if you only believe that the husband makes the final decision, but you don't act it out, you still see negative outcomes, including more chronic pain disorders for women. Like this affects us. The fact that women will do more housework if she says that she believes that he makes the final decision, even if they don't act it out. The good news is that most people don't act it out, and it is far worse if you do act it out. So the good news is most people don't act it out. But people still say they believe it.
Yeah.
And, what I'm trying to say is, look, if you don't act it out, can we just stop saying that it's the way to do things?
Exactly.
Because it's so disastrous when people act it out.
Oh, it is. And one of the things when I think about that specifically is most of the people that would say that it's healthy probably actually have an egalitarian relationship, right?
Absolutely.
So and also when you have, I think what blows my mind a lot is when you hold a belief like that, I think it's really important that you always put it in the position of like, what if it was an abusive relationship dynamic? And does that hold up as good in that situation? And if it doesn't, it's probably a bad idea. Yes. Or if it's an idea that really allows so much abuse, which is ultimately what, why would there be a divorce rate of 81% in that particular scenario? Probably because it's really leading to and opening to doors of control and coercion and pressure and really unhealthy dynamics.
Yeah, and entitlement. And think about what intimacy is. And this is something that I so wish that Christians could better understand. Is intimacy is what we're looking for in marriage, right? Intimacy is this idea that I am able to be completely authentic and vulnerable with you. You are able to be authentic and vulnerable with me. We create safe spaces for each other, and we truly know each other. You cannot be authentic and vulnerable with someone if your opinions don't matter as much as theirs do. If they can overrule you, then they simply can't know you because they do not value who you are in the same way that you value who they are. Yeah, so hierarchy is incompatible with intimacy. It just is. And we're not
that's a great way to put it. Yeah.
We're not the only ones who say this. Like, this is in pretty much every study that's ever been done of relationship dynamics. Yeah. And so the fact that the church is the one that is teaching hierarchy, which goes against everything we know about healthy relationships, as well as everything we know about how Jesus operated and taught and modeled, is just wild to me, because it shows that too much of the evangelical church is not interested in actually pursuing a Jesus-centered life, but is more interested in making sure that men stay at the top. That is not going to fix marriages or sex.
Well, I think that's the thing. Like I said earlier, in my mind, I'm like, it's this men on top thing. I'm like, it blows my mind when women are teaching other women that, and they don't question it, and they keep perpetuating it. And gosh, that's so hard for me to understand.
I mean, we had a bit of insight into that in our dynamics in our studies, because I know especially for our book She Deserves Better, which was about specifically purity culture teachings, we kind of drilled down on this a bit, and we found that women who believed a lot of the purity culture messages as adults, like women who still believed them, tended to be in much rockier marriages. So they tended to be in abusive marriages themselves, or marriages that were dominated by porn use or whatever. And so, when you're in a really difficult situation and you're trying to make sense of it, feeling like there are rules that we can follow that will fix our marriages gives you an illusion of control. And so, it's a way of, like, if you can convince yourself, if I just pray enough, things will get better.
Oh, let's talk about that. Yeah.
Then that's what you end up teaching. Or if you convince yourself, the problem is not that my husband's a porn user. The problem is that all of these girls and women around us are dressing immodestly and they're provoking him. And you think about Dana Gresh, who wrote the Bibles of purity culture and The Bride Wore White. She did The Secret Keeper Girl. Like, she was a premier author and probably the foremost author on modesty. And now she's just written a book about how the whole time her husband was a raging porn addict. So,
I did not know that. Wow.
Yeah. And so, I mean, it's just a perfect example of why do women teach these things? Because they're often in difficult situations, and they're trying to make sense of them, and they don't want to have to leave their spouses. So they're trying to control other things around them to make the whole thing more tenable.
When you just hit on that, one of the messages that people get, the women, is, if you pray harder, or it's this idea that when your partner is doing something wrong, somehow you're the one that can fix it.
Yes.
And if you change yourself hard enough, then your marriage will be fine. If you are sexier, or if you pray harder, or you just keep overriding your own boundaries, like that will make things better. And, you hear sometimes the messaging of like nagging or whatever, a nagging wife. And so sometimes women will sometimes internalize that as like, I'm not allowed to bring up anything that I have an issue with in this relationship. And so they go, I stopped bringing it up and my relationship got better. And I'm like, well, of course, because like he's not upset because now he can do whatever he wants, right? So yeah, it's this idea that the victim has to work harder.
Yep.
And that's crazy.
There's this story in Love and Respect that I keep coming back to because it's just so outrageous. So Emerson Eggerichs, who wrote Love and Respect, which is the most widely used marriage curriculum in North American churches, or at least it was until recently. He tells the story of how he and his sons would consistently leave candy wrappers on the floor and he would leave wet towels on the bed. Okay. Now, leaving wet towels on the bed is gross, right? Like that means your sheets are going to get mildewy, and it takes no more energy to even leave the wet towel on the floor than it does to leave it on the bed. Like, not that you should do that either, but leaving it on the bed is like just especially terrible, right? This creates more work. Your bed's gross. It has to be changed. Like, this is bad, right? So he was doing this consistently, and his wife kept telling him to stop. And then his wife, Sarah, goes away for a week. And when she comes back, she asks him if he missed her. And he said, well, no, it was actually better with you not here. And the conclusion to that story is that she realized how much of a nag she was being, and she realized how disrespectful she was being. And so she just stopped asking.
Wow.
And they tell this story even in their conference series as an example of how disrespectful Sarah was, because she kept asking him to stop leaving wet towels on the bed. And it's like, buddy, this is a you problem.
Right.
And, the fact that the answer to it is that she just simply stopped speaking is wild.
Yeah. Yeah, that's more demonstrative. That's so demonstrative of a huge problem. When I feel like women, often I see them try really, really hard for a really long time. When you see them kind of stop trying, is like, oh, you have hit the wall in your relationship, and you've pushed the rope is at its end. It's frail at that point is often what I will see. Yeah, wow, yeah, and to push that as like, hey, healthy marriage, like. Somehow the guy always gets to do what he wants to do, and you don't.
Well, and that's the whole problem with this idea of men need respect in a way that women don't understand, and men are in authority over women, is that he then has the power to define what is disrespectful.
Ugh, yeah, right. That's true.
And so anytime she does anything, and you see this throughout the book, there is no way for her to bring anything up without being disrespectful. Like at one point, he forgets her birthday, and she mentions it at dinner. And she's not angry. She's not nagging. She's just simply sad.
Yeah.
And he calls it disrespectful because he didn't realize, or because she wasn't acknowledging that he would never have done this deliberately. So because she mentioned that she was sad over him forgetting her birthday, she is the one who's disrespectful. And that was a big lesson they had to learn. And it's like, yeah.
Well, it's one thing for people to be sharing this and then thinking, hey, I'm representing a healthy marriage by teaching people this. And it's a whole other thing that there is a world of people out here that are absorbing this and not questioning it. And that is so sad to just grow up with that as a concept, because then you don't think you can expect better. You don't think you can hold people to a high standard. And it's like, man, I have so much more respect for men than that, I think that they're capable of so much more than that. And I think that God created them to be so much more than that. And so, yeah, like I said, we're very thankful for the work that you do pointing all of it out, because you do it in such a clear way. I have a note that my husband, he usually co-hosts the podcast with me, and he's not here, and he really wanted to meet you. And so he wanted to share a note with you, if that's okay that I read that. And it references some of your work as well. So this is from Patrick. He said, Sheila, shortly after I was discovered, I was handed the book Every Man's Battle by a well-meaning pastor friend. In the midst of my shame at what I had done, confusion about recovery, and the overwhelming desire to do the right thing, the message from Every Man's Battle filled me with dread. The book did not make it seem like recovering or being normal was possible. Thanks to Kylene's discernment, his words, she pointed me to the Great Sex Rescue, where healing and positive and helpful ways to view sexuality became the norm. It calmed my nervous system down because it taught me that I could recover and treat everyone with respect. I was not locked into a behavior pattern until the end of my life. I make it a point to recommend you to all my group participants and show them figures 5.1 and 5.2, our alternative model of arousal and lust,
Yes.
to all of the men. It is so helpful and helps empower the addicted that they can live a life of freedom. Thanks so much for the work you do and for how you challenge poor cultural norms that convince men that they are uncontrollable idiots who can't help themselves. Men can live into something much, much greater than those old teachings imply.
Oh, that's lovely. Thank you.
Yeah.
I mean, what he's saying is so true, though. Like, it's such a terrible view of men.
Yeah,
Like,
it really
the
is.
idea that this is every man's battle, you're never going to get over it. They literally say, when it comes to sexual sin, we got there naturally simply by being male. Elsewhere, they say men just don't have that Christian view of sex. Like, they literally say that God made men to sin.
Ugh, yeah, it's so terrible.
That is men's basic makeup. And this book series sold 4 million copies.
Yeah. It's really, like I said, it's one thing to push a message thinking that what you're doing is good in some way, but then for people not to question it is so disappointing, you know? And it does, I feel like it really does keep people stuck. I know shortly after he read that book, he had some doubts. He's like, well, what if, I'm not able to live a normal life and get healthy? And I was like, cut it out. It's like, no, you can't believe that, you know? It's like, you are capable of more and it's okay. And he really had to be reminded of it. So it's really sad in so many ways that the message is out there that really disempowers people from trying to accomplish more and to just accept that, hey, there's this part of you that is never going to be able to accomplish health. And that I just totally believe that's untrue.
Yep, absolutely. And if you think about it, you know, Every Man's Battle was written by two men who had absolutely zero qualifications, except that they were self-proclaimed former sex addicts. That's it. They did not use any research.
Former would be questionable based on how they write the book.
I agree because of the way that they talk.
Yeah.
Like they literally said, you know, that when men quit cold turkey, wives can be like a merciful vial of methadone for them. Like they talk about women as objects.
Right. Yeah.
And they never mention, and honestly, the descriptions of women in the book are pornographic. It's themselves. It's terrible. Banquets of glistening flesh. Like you just don't talk about women that way. And their solution to lust is to treat women the same way porn does. Like porn sees women as objects that exist for men's gratification. And what is their solution? You turn to your wife. And you use her as an object to get rid of your sexual feelings, and then you bounce your eyes from every other woman. So instead of objectifying all women, you objectify one woman for the rest of your life, and then you ignore all others.
Right.
But whether you are bouncing your eyes...
Just treat one person badly. Right?
Yeah, exactly. But whether you bounce your eyes from women or whether you lust after them, you are still treating women as objects.
100%.
And Jesus never refused to look at women. You know, Jesus chose to truly see women. And that's the one thing that they won't do. And the fact that the church, like of all the books that could have been written about getting over porn, the fact that they promoted this one so heavily and that pastors related to this one so heavily is such an indictment of the evangelical church.
Yeah, it really is. It's depressing in many ways. Thankfully, there's so much over the past maybe 10, 20 years, there's so much new, better information. And I think there is an encouraging trend now that is so much healthier in a lot of ways about what the behavior really is. And why do you think, a lot of that messaging really does focus on, pressure on the victim instead of the perpetrator. And I know so much of your work really pushes back against all of the myths and the things that we're talking about in this. And why do you think it's so difficult for people to sometimes accept that those messages are wrong?
I think a lot of us grew up with a lot of trauma. And a lot of us are in churches that if you start questioning those messages, everything comes crashing down. Once you start pulling at one thread, you end up pulling at all the threads. So they teach so heavily that, if women are just sexier, their husbands won't lust, or if you have sex enough, your husband won't watch porn, or if he has an affair, it's because you didn't pray enough, or you didn't do all those things. And if you start to say, well, maybe, maybe God doesn't make me the sin management tool for my husband, maybe he's responsible to Jesus himself, then a lot of the other things that we hear do come crashing down. And a lot of the church is currently set up to make sure that those in power don't ever get questioned. And I think that's how a lot of these really toxic doctrines get so big.
Sort of this idea that if you question it, it means you're giving up on all of it, as opposed to more of a disentanglement of what is true and what is not.
Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, Jesus said that a bad tree can't bear good fruit and a good tree can't bear bad fruit. And so you'll recognize them by their fruit. And that's what we try to do. We try to do it in The Great Sex Rescue, our biggest book, in our new marriage book, The Marriage You Want. But we're just saying, look, this is what leads to health. And this is what doesn't. and we need to recognize this because that's what Jesus said to do.
Yeah.
And you're not going against God if you look at evidence.
Right. Yeah.
You're actually doing what Jesus said. But I think a lot of us feel like, well, it doesn't matter if there's bad outcomes. I need to believe the Bible. Right? And we get in these terrible places where we're stuck. And Jesus says to us, look, if your interpretation of the Bible leads to really bad outcomes, maybe your interpretation is off.
That's it. Yeah.
And Jesus doesn't want us thinking that God feels like our pimp, which is what often happens when we feel like, if I don't have sex enough, my husband's going to watch pornography. Well, that really does make God into your pimp. That's not safe for your marriage. That's not safe for your relationship with Jesus.
Right.
That's stealing God from you when you need him most.
Yeah. And it pushes this idea, I think, too, that that the suffering aspect is somehow making you holier.
Yes.
As opposed to, hey, truth brings freedom. And relationships should feel incredibly safe. And so some of the messaging you get is just really mixed up around all of that in terms of, but I was told that suffering is, and that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to be the long-suffering wife, right?
Yes, but where does the suffering come in the New Testament that refines you? It doesn't come from other Christian relationships. It comes from the Romans or the religious leaders.
Right.
Paul isn't saying it is good to suffer at the hands of other Christians. Paul says, no, you speak up. You say something when someone's hurting you. Yeah. You expel the wicked one from among you. You don't have anything to do with people who are sexually immoral. He doesn't tell you that we're supposed to put up with suffering. He says, I have learned to be content in situations where I have no control. He doesn't say, I have learned to be content even when people are treating me badly and I could do something about it.
Yes. I love the way you just said that. Yeah, you because that really is just, hey, I'm allowed to have boundaries, is what you just said. And it's a really important thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so true. I love the way that you tied all of that together. I know a lot of the older resources, around addiction, around betrayal, they would label spouses as codependent. And which in a lot of situations is untrue. And they've sort of realized that and now shifted away from that. But a lot of that messaging is still out there. And what's your perspective on the label of codependency when you have those types of messages?
Yeah, I don't think that's very helpful whatsoever. I think it is very important for everybody to look at themselves and say, how is there any way that I've contributed to where we are right now? Because and a lot of women have contributed to a certain extent, just simply in the sense that we didn't feel like we could say anything. And so understanding that, I didn't say anything because I didn't feel that it was my role, or I took on a lot of guilt that I didn't need to take on. That can be a really growth experience to realize that wasn't God's voice. That's freeing and that's validating. But I think a much better model to see a lot of addiction is recognizing that so much of this stuff is rooted in our emotional wounds as kids. It's rooted in especially our emotional regulation. And the fact that for many men and women who use porn too, porn became their way of emotionally regulating themselves.
Right.
So, you're 13 years old, and you see porn and it excites you and you're confused and you don't really want it to excite you, but you're curious and you seek it out again. You masturbate, you feel good. It's a temporary high, but it does feel good. And then maybe the next week you don't make the basketball team and you feel lousy because you didn't make the basketball team. And so you watch porn again because it made you feel good. And so, what are we supposed to be doing in our teenage years? We're supposed to be learning how to deal with rejection and how to deal with disappointment, how to deal with boredom.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
How to deal with angst. And instead, there's a whole generation who didn't learn any of that because what they had was pornography. And then you combine that with shame cycles.
Yeah.
And all of it just gets wrapped up in this terribly toxic mess.
Right.
And then what a lot of Christian resources did was they said, well, you just need to try harder. Mm-hmm. But they didn't recognize that, wait a minute, you need to go back and reparent yourself, because a lot of 40-year-old women are still married to 13-year-old boys because the men never grew emotionally beyond 13 years old.
That's it. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's so true. A lot of times when they're emotionally and intimately disrupted.
Mm-hmm. And, and I think that we can have some compassion on that, because none of us were ever meant to grow up with internet porn the way that we did. And 13-year-old boys do not have the frontal lobe capability to say no to that. And these are all conversations we need to be having with our kids and teenagers too.
Absolutely, yeah.
But that doesn't excuse the 38-year-old from not dealing with the emotional regulation issues that has caused this whole thing to spiral.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's. I think technology certainly exploded the problem. It made it easy access. Technology itself is addicting. It's, at your fingertips. There's endless variety, right? There's so many reasons that it has become such a tremendous issue. And we can have, like, to your point, we can have all the compassion and empathy in the world. And when we're adults, we have to be adults.
Yes.
And it's absolutely okay to be setting the boundaries and again, holding them to higher standards and expectations, saying, I think you're capable of accomplishing that. And I think, in a lot of situations, that's exactly what they need. And kind of what helps them get there is that expectation.
Yep.
You have provided so many amazing resources around these topics. Do you have favorite books or podcasts that you recommend to betrayed women or women in unhealthy marriages, outside, obviously, of Bare Marriage and the books you've made?
Oh, gosh. You mean outside of my own?
Outside of your own, because we're gonna push those hard. Are there additional ones?
Just for women in destructive relationships, I find Leslie Vernick is a really good place to start because she helps people recognize the difference between a difficult marriage and a destructive one. And a lot of people are just never given permission to ask that question.
Yeah.
And so I often send people to her. I think there's some really good work being done for men. Jay Stringer's got some great stuff.
He's amazing. Love him.
Andrew Bowman has some really good stuff, and he has a new what's it called, like online community just for men. And again, what he's really challenging men to do is to grow emotionally and to own their own stuff and to recognize, like, this isn't who I was made to be. Yeah. And porn has influenced the way that I see women. It's influenced the way I treat women. It's given me an entitlement mindset that I need to let go of. And he really, and the only way to let go of all that is through authenticity and vulnerability. And so he really stresses that side of it, which is something that the whole every man's battle philosophy gets away from.
Right.
Because it's all about just self-control, which you can't just will yourself to have self-control. You need to actually be vulnerable.
Yeah.
So I really like them, and I think I'm encouraged by how many men are coming forward with really healthy resources. Sam Jolman has some good stuff. Zachary Wagner has a new book out, I think this week, yesterday, I think.
Nice.
called Men of Virtue. Or today. I think it launches today. Yeah, Men of Virtue.
By the time this will be out, people can purchase it. Right.
So like there are really good things being written.
I think there's a wave for sure.
Yeah, there is. And I think a lot of the publishers who published all the rotten stuff, a lot of them are publishing good stuff now. The problem is they're just not getting rid of the rotten stuff because it still sells.
Well, you've had a lot of pushback too, from leaders in the Christian community. You will point these things out and the authors will just like ignore you or argue with you, or, it's so disappointing that they will not self-reflect and change.
Well, yeah, because I'm not asking anyone to do something I haven't done. That's the thing. Like, I asked for books to be taken out of print and the books weren't even that bad. There was just like 2 pages where I was like, oh, I shouldn't have said that. And I can't live with it now, Yeah. And part of it was around codependency, actually. There's books I've asked to be taken out of print. There's podcasts I've taken down. We moved our blog over from what it used to be, and I erased like 1,000 blog posts.
Yeah.
I used to teach a version of the obligation sex message, and I do everything I can in my power to make sure that people know I don't believe that anymore and that there's a healthier way. Right. Like, it isn't difficult to say, wow, okay, I'm looking at the data,
right.
And boy, was that messed up. So here's what we need to do instead. Like, that is not a difficult thing to do. And especially if your main goal is, hey, let's follow Jesus where he's leading us. Let's get healthy. And so the fact that not a single author that we critiqued, and we ended up looking at the 15 best-selling sex and marriage books in evangelicalism and evaluating them, not a single one of them has said, hey, I need to take my book out of print, or I really did this wrong. I find that very difficult. Now, 3 of the books weren't bad, so 3 of the books were okay, but like not a single other one has said.
It's so disappointing. I mean, I think to your point, it's like it's one thing if we do what we know when we can, right? And we were all sort of raised, or a lot of us were raised with these ideas, but when you're presented with the reality. When, it's like, how can you go your entire life without challenging your belief? That's not really something to be proud of, right? To be presented with the truth and to not be willing to challenge it or to apologize or say, oh, I'm capable of making mistakes. Like that in and of itself is problematic.
Yeah, I mean, I look at both my daughters and the way that they're raising their little kids, and I'm just so thrilled to bits because they're doing it better than I did, because we know stuff now that we didn't know in the 90s.
Right. Yeah.
We know stuff about temper tantrums that we didn't know.
Right.
And we handled them wrong. And I'm like, oh, this is so great that that my daughter is treating her grandson differently than I treated my daughter.
Yeah.
Because I didn't know. Right. And I am thrilled to bits. And
that's awesome.
Because I feel like, we're getting closer to the vision that Jesus had for us.
Yeah.
And shouldn't that be the aim?
That should be.
And that's, and I think people are getting that. I think like the feeling that I get in my online conversations is that there's just such a hunger for the real Jesus. And people are saying to the evangelical church, you don't get to steal Jesus from me. Even if I'm deconstructing, even if I'm disentangling, even if I'm questioning all of these beliefs, you who are saying all these terrible things don't get to claim Jesus.
Right. Yeah.
Because maybe the reason that we're disentangling and maybe the reason that we're thinking these things through is actually because Jesus is doing a big movement. And I think that's what's happening.
Absolutely.
He's calling us back to authenticity and to vulnerability and all of these beautiful things and true intimacy rather than to entitlement and power.
Absolutely. And they are such beautiful things. I think when you experience it, it's so transformational in your world, in your thinking, and in how you relate to other people. And it's so important. Kind of on that note, when it comes to messaging in the churches, because I know you receive a lot of pushback from a lot of areas, and sometimes maybe not pushback as much as just, we're going to ignore what you have to say, right? What are your thoughts on, messaging to those conservative churches, like getting the evidence, and maybe you don't have an answer to this because it's hard, getting the evidence in a way that it's not dismissed. Like, I know that's kind of, that's your movement, right? So it's a hard one and it gets rejected so much. And what have you found? I mean, have there been pockets of people that receive and say, oh my gosh, this has changed
our church's perspective or.
Yeah, I think it's easier with sex, ironically. I think that
Interesting.
people are way more interested in sex because everybody wants a good sex life. Like, this is pretty easy, okay? Everybody tends to want, to have fun. And I think there's a real openness to the idea that, hey, a 47-point orgasm gap between men and women isn't cool. And hey,
To say the least.
like maybe women should be enjoying sex too. Like, that's not actually it shouldn't be a radical message, but that is something that people of all stripes tend to believe. And I think that's why the Great Sex Rescue has been so influential, even in some of those conservative circles. I think the message that, marriage should be one of mutuality and partnership, which is what we were talking about in The Marriage You Want, is a little bit of a harder sell because that gets down to issues of power, which people are less likely to give up. But I think people are open to conversations about sex because it's just a real felt need. Like that's the real place of pain.
Yeah.
For a lot of couples.
That makes sense.
Right? Like a lot of men feel very rejected in marriages where their wife has a lower sex drive. And they don't know what to do with that rejection, and they don't understand what's happening because they were told their whole life that if you just wait for marriage, then she's going to fix everything for you and you won't be tempted by pornography and everything is going to be hot and wonderful. And then it isn't, and they don't know what to do about that. And a lot of women feel used or like sex just is a big ripoff.
Right.
And no one wants to be in that. So, yeah.
Well, and pastors are so often so unqualified to answer a lot of the questions that may come up when people come to them. What's your thought around, the line between pastoral care and professional care?
In general, I think pastors should be recommending, I think the pressure on pastors is insane. Nobody should be asking pastors to give marriage advice, let alone sex advice. And I see these mega church pastors dragging their wives out on Instagram lives and stuff to give sex talks. Yeah. And I just find that so incredibly wrong and degrading. The funny thing is I do this work with my daughter. My daughter is the co-host of our podcast. She's one of the two co-authors on the Great Sex Rescue, and she deserves better. She's amazing. And we like to joke that we talk about sex all the time, but we have no idea what each other does in the bedroom because there's a way, there's a way to talk about it where you're talking about evidence, best practices, what the research says.
Yes.
But you don't ever want to share something that anyone could picture, right? Like, that's the key thing. Like, I don't want anyone picturing me because I'm not talking about me. I'm talking about what the evidence says.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And I think when people don't know what the evidence says, the only thing they have to go on is their own experience. And that's where we got into the problem that we're in today, is that we allowed people who were not qualified to write books. So just because someone's a pastor does not mean that they're an expert on sex or marriage. And if you look at the vast majority of our best-selling books, they were not written by anybody with a counseling degree or a psychology degree, or they weren't, or even if they did have a psychology degree, I'm thinking about Kevin Lehman, for instance, they weren't written using peer-reviewed research. They were just written from his own opinion. And we should not be basing any of this stuff on someone's own opinion because it's too important. And the only thing that you know is your own experience. Just because you found something useful in the bedroom does not mean everybody else is going to. And this is why we need to see actual research. So I'm hoping that raises the bar. Like we've done all of these studies now. We've also got 3 peer-reviewed papers out. We've got more coming, more accepted. Like, we've been trying to, just raise the bar as what counts as research and advice in evangelicalism, and hoping that people catch on that it isn't enough to just say, oh, because you're a pastor, you can write a book on sex.
Right. Yeah. Yes. I love that you're raising the bar. And to that end, as we sort of come to a close, can you maybe describe a healthy Christian marriage and what that should feel like?
Yeah. It should feel like a partnership. It should feel like I have someone who I get to do life with, who's there to lift me up when I fall down so that I can lift them up when they fall down. And I have someone who knows me inside and out and still here with me. And, we say in The Marriage You Want that marriage is really about someone who is taking responsibility and initiative to care about you. right? Like they're noticing when you're sad, and they're saying, "Hey, what can I do?
Yeah.
What can I do to listen or to show up for you?" They're noticing when you're exhausted, and they're saying, "Hey, what can I do? How can I show up for you?" And they're figuring it out, right? And both of you need to be doing that because that's what makes you feel safe.
Yeah.
Because marriage should be a safe place where you know, okay, I can let my guard down. I'm protected. I've got someone beside me. And that's what we want.
Absolutely. Yeah. If you have 1.5 to 2 minutes, I have a lightning round for you. Personal questions here.
Okay.
What do you and Keith like to do for fun?
Oh, he is a huge bird watcher. And
that's awesome.
Like mega bird watcher. And I'm actually pretty good at it too. I'm better at spotting birds than he is. I just can't identify them. I'm like, oh, look, there's not a duck. I
love it. We had a bird that I think flew into our front door and died. And I was like, I think it might be a woodpecker.
Yeah. But I love getting outdoors. I love hiking. And so that's something that we love doing together. And then we just bought a huge property, with our daughter and my mom. And so just fixing up the property has kind of consumed our life for the last little while.
Yeah. Oh, that's wonderful that you're together as a family. That's got to be really, really nice. That's beautiful. What's your favorite book?
Oh gosh, I'm Pride and Prejudice.
Well,
except I go back and forth. Persuasion is like, Persuasion's really good too. Like that letter, when she reads Wentworth's letter, I think that's like the best moment in all of literature. But I don't know. I think Pride and Prejudice is a perfect book.
That's awesome. If you had to choose the movie version, would it be the really long 6-hour version?
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
10 out of 10.
Although Mrs. Bennet, I will always go for Blenda Blethyn as Mrs. Bennet from the Keira Knightley version. She was incredible.
I love it.
Yep.
And finally, what is one thing you would want to accomplish in life if there were no obstacles?
Oh, I always say professionally, what I want to accomplish is that nobody needs the Great Sex Rescue in 10 years. That the book stops selling because we've healed the world. We've healed the world. Personally, there's a few knitting books I want to get through, like where I knit every single pattern. So
I love it. Oh, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Well, I really, really, really just want to thank you again. I know that the work you do is just incredibly important. It is truly transforming lives. And when you're doing something that pushes against the status quo, I know that there must be times where that feels exhausting and overwhelming and frustrating, when people are not receiving it. And I just want to thank you so much from the people who are receiving it, who it is making a difference for, and whose lives are really, really positively impacted. And we just appreciate the work you do so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Where can people find you and connect with you and buy your books?
Yeah, so come to baremarriage.com, BARE, baremarriage.com. And I've got all my social media stuff there. I'm pretty fun on Instagram. I do these like fixed it for you things, and I'm pretty active on Facebook too. And then there's links to our books. Great Sex Rescue is our big one. It'll make you feel validated and seen. Marriage You Want is awesome. She Deserves Better if you're recovering from purity culture, but they're all there.
They're all fantastic.
And we have some courses too, especially to help your teenager deal with porn and sex and puberty.
Awesome.
So, yeah, check all those out.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Woohoo! If you're listening to this, it means you've made it through an entire episode. Part of recovery is spending time engaging in healing and self-growth activities. We are thankful that you chose our podcast to be one of those activities today. Make sure you reward yourself for that accomplishment. If you've enjoyed this episode or this podcast, we would love to hear from you. Please take just a few moments to leave a rating and review, letting us know your experience with Recover You. We not only love hearing how these episodes are helpful, but ratings and reviews help others just like you who are searching for recovery information and support find the podcast too. We can't wait to hear from you. See you next week.